Well, welcome to our session today. I'm Adam Chain, CEO of Sports Environment Alliance, and I'd like to introduce you to the Bettercup team for our topic today of reuse at sports events and practical steps and tools to get us started. So this is one in which we really enjoy because it's those little one percenters that kind of get us moving and thinking and kind of that inspiration that we can do and we can achieve and make our events more sustainable. But what's important to do is that I will give a brief introduction of the Bettercup team if you haven't heard of them. And if you would like to just bear with me for a second. So Bettercup is the most trusted reuse system provider in Australia and New Zealand. So they started back in 2018, working across grassroots and community level, and have since continued on their support of some of the most iconic venues and events brands across a range of countries. So this includes the Australian Open, Sydney Opera House, Wamoda Adelaide, Dark Mofo, and Sky Stadium. So some really large and important events that really trying to turn the dial in terms of the sustainability movements. Their team regularly works with local councils, state government, and international collaborators, and really like to share that expertise. So really try and get some insights from today because we're going to get some good nuggets. So today we're going to work through with co-founders Christie and Sam. So welcome, and they'll guide you through today. And they're going to provide real-world examples and insights to introduce a planning tool that we all can use to explore reuse that might look down a venue or an event in the future that may be on your radar. So this is designed to be a collaborative, open session. Get inspiration and insights. And if something really comes to mind with a question, feel free to raise your hand for discussion or jump in. And I'm sure Christy and Sam will be more than happy to share more. So I'm going to pass over to yourselves there to the Bettercup team and look forward to the next 45 minutes or so. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Adam. So, hi, I'm Christy. And I'm Sam. So Sam and I started Bettercup because we saw a really clear problem, event waste, specifically from single-use food and beverage packaging that was piling up. And there weren't any practical, locally focused alternatives that really were designed for or on the scale of events. So we set out to change that. And one of the first things I looked into on those in those early days was how we could manufacture locally. And I do remember specifically calling around and getting laughed at down the phone more than once around, and why would you bother trying to do this? And no one really took it seriously at that point. But that only made us more determined to do our own manufacturing and begin setting a new standard for events with making reuse the norm. So today, as Adam mentioned, we operate across Australia and New Zealand, helping all sorts of organisations with reuse systems that are simple, scalable, and actually work for their specific context. So today is all about helping you take those first steps into reuse. So if you're still figuring out whether reuse is even possible for your venue, event, or sporting club, you're exactly who we had in mind for the session. So let's get into it. Right. So we all know that single-use waste is out of control. Compostables aren't the solution. Most still end up in landfill, either because they're thrown in the wrong bin or because the infrastructure to process them doesn't exist. State governments across Australia are introducing bans on many single-use products, including compostables, and New Zealand has also started to follow that. Compliance is tightening and the pressure to act is growing fast, and whether that's at a packed out stadium or a Saturday game at your local club, chances are that you've seen overflowing bins, cups under seats, and that sinking feeling when your cleanup crew is ankle deep in discarded packaging. So the question is no longer should we change, it's really about the how. But we know that those first steps can feel quite overwhelming. What will it cost? How many reusable items will you need? And how will people actually return those reusable items? And how do we make reuse work for us? So those are all really valid concerns, and we do hear them often, but they are totally solvable. And today's about showing you what's possible, what's already working, and giving you the tools to take those first steps with clarity and confidence. So a bit more about reuse, and we'll be the first to admit that reuse is not a flick of the switch substitution. It does require more thought than single use, but it is already working across a wide range of events and venues. Sky Stadium in New Zealand has made reuse as part of its ongoing operations, and here in Australia, major events like the Australian Open are integrating reuse to meet environmental goals, and smaller councils and community clubs are adopting similar systems at a smaller scale. So to put it into perspective, one event with 1,000 patrons, each having 2 drinks, means that 2,000 single-use cups would be used just for that one event. With reuse, those cups would be returned by fans, washed and used again, event after event, ongoing. The result would be less waste in bins, smarter operations and use of our critical resources, and a cultural shift in how fans behave. And rather than guessing what reuse will look like in your setting, we'll show you how to model it on your own event numbers shortly. So I'll cover off what a reuse system is. So it's not just about the cup or plate, it's a surrounding system. So that's what we mean when we say reuse system. And there's 5 key parts of that we highlight to make it all work really seamlessly. So that includes the reusable product, the patron journey, back of house operations, cost recovery and funding, and data and insights. And what I'll do is I'll quickly walk through each of those briefly now, and that will help you to get thinking about how doable reuse can be for you. So when we talk about a reusable product, it's not just any cup or plate. It should meet a few key criteria to function well in a reuse system. The material that you choose needs to be food safe, durable enough for commercial washing and ongoing use, and clearly marked so that patrons know to return it. And importantly, you'll want to choose products that are ethically sourced and have a clear end of life pathway when they're no longer suitable for reuse. So a successful reuse system really does hinge on the patron journey, and this really starts before the event. So with a clear pre-event comm strategy that sets the expectation early. And when you're venturing into reuse, first off, on site, it's about making that return process really obvious and easy. And that includes how the items are provided at food or bar vendors, what signage they see, what they're told by staff if they ask, and where return bins are placed. So if those touch points are super clear and consistent, people will return items without needing to think twice. So if you want to achieve high return rates, this is where simplicity and consistency really do matter. Back of house operation. So once the item is returned, what happens next? So this is where your back of house considerations will come in, and having a plan for how items are collected, stored, washed, and reset for reuse. So key things to be thinking about. So that might be as simple as having a small team of people washing on site with existing washers you already have, or it might involve a full service model provided by a supplier like us with washing we offer offsite. Either way, that key is having clarity around those steps so nothing gets missed. The single use might seem low cost, but it does add up quickly over time. You're essentially paying for packaging at every event and paying to dispose of it too. It's a recurring cost to create waste that you're giving away for free, basically. And so with reuse, you're investing in a system that is designed to keep products in circulation. So yes, there can be higher upfront setup costs involved, but over time, these costs can be cost neutral, or the system can begin to pay for itself. The key is really treating reuse as part of your overall operational considerations for long-term success, not just a bolt-on extra. With data and insights, you want to track things like how many items are served and returned, your stakeholder feedback, and how much waste you've avoided using. And this type of information does really help you refine your system over time and demonstrate your ongoing success. So now I'm going to hand over to Sam, who's going to show you what reuse looks like in action with some examples.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to show you what reuse has achieved in terms of waste savings across some events and venues, including sports, councils, and major festivals. And after that, I'll demonstrate the cost of reusable cups compared to single use using our reuse calculator. So as you can see in the bottom left at the AFL Gather Round was a smaller but focused implementation of reusable plates and bowls. So over the course of the event, 8,590 items were reused, which diverted 125 kilograms of waste from landfill. And up the top right at Fringe World Perth is a 31-day event that served more than 46,000 drinks in reusable cups with an 84.7% return rate and diverted 370 kilos of waste from landfill. Then we've got the Australian Open. This year, they had reusable plates, bowls, and cups across food and beverage service in the Garden Square precinct. So in total, 136,932 items were washed and reused, which diverted 1.6 tonnes of waste from landfill. That is the equivalent to 319 wheelie bins worth of single-use items removed from the waste stream. So it's pretty crazy when you picture that. And then we've got Feel Good in Wellington, which is actually a citywide reuse system. That one has supported 192 events across sports and community venues, processing over 140,000 reusable items and building a networked approach to washing and logistics across the city. That's one we have a really cool case study on. So if you're interested, let us know and we can send that over to you. Across all these examples, we consistently see return rates in the 80 to 85% range, and that doesn't have any complex consumer-facing tech. It's just got really good signage. Some people use deposit systems. That's stuff we can go into in the next couple of slides. What makes the difference really is system design, communication, and smart operations. So whether it's a one-day match or a national tournament or a month-long festival, reuse is working now at scale. So next I'll show you how to explore what this could look like at your event using our reusable cup calculator. Cool. So we've talked about a little bit. We'll just give it a sec to zoom in. Hang on. Yeah. We want it to be about there. Yeah. Cool. So let's have a look what the costs look like compared to single-use cups. So we often get asked, firstly, how many cups am I going to need? And secondly, how much is this going to cost? So to answer those questions, we've built this calculator. The calculator is designed to show you how much waste and money you can save over 1 year at a sports club, stadium, or other venue hosting ongoing events. You can change the inputs to like a set period of time if you want to, for example, 3 or 6 months. And then the outputs will tell you how much single-use waste you can avoid, how many reusable items you'll need, and it can help you model cost offsetting, such as deposits or increasing drink prices. So I'm going to walk you through 2 examples. The first one will be a medium-sized sports club, and the second one will be a large stadium. And then you can see how the calculator works across these different types of venues. Sorry. So we'll start with a medium-sized sports club. So on the calculator, the blue cells are the parts where you enter your information. And then the first section, we enter number of patrons, drinks served in cups per person, and number of events per year. For this club, I'm going to assume they have an average of 300 patrons who drink 1.5 drinks per person, and they have an event a week, so 50 events. This club is paying 25 cents for every single-use cup they buy. So I'm going to keep this on pad printing for now, which is like our basic printing type that applies well to smaller venues. If you want any more info, you can just click this link when you get the calculator sent to you. So as I scroll down, the calculator has recommended 2,016 reusable cups and pre-filled the price per cup for that quantity, which is $1.50 each. The calculator is looking up pricing on a separate tab, which I've hidden so that I'm not accidentally clicking everywhere when I show you this. The next part has an industry average loss rate of 6%, which is the number of cups lost per drink served. So 6 cups per 100 drinks served. I want to pause on this section and show you how the loss rate impacts the actual losses. So if I change it to 10%, I'm losing an extra 900 cups per year, which is a lot. So in terms of cost, that's over $1,000. So it makes sense to ensure that you've got the right signage and messaging to make sure attendees aren't putting cups in the bin. You'll also notice that if you increase the loss rate, the calculator will tell you that you need a high number of reusable cups, which will affect your upfront cost. So here at the bottom of the sheet, there's an option for charging a deposit. Charging a deposit can be a great way to fundraise for your club, especially if you're still using cash. In terms of logistics, returning deposits via cash is usually the easiest way because many point of sale systems charge you to process refunds. So to show you how this can look in terms of cost, I'm going to put a $2 deposit in. And I'm going to give $2 back to everyone who returns their cup. So we are going to assume that 85% of the people who pay the deposit will bring their cup back for a refund. Others may leave the cup on the grounds to be collected by cleaners, and some might take their cup home or put it in the wrong bin. So now we're going to move to the results tab. As you can see, using single-use cups is costing this club $5,625 per year, and it's producing 180 kilograms of waste, or about 30 wheelie bins. So if we switch to reusables, there will be a cost of $3,024 to purchase the cups, but by the end of the year, we're still going to have 660 cups left, which are worth about $1,000. And we'll also have to save $2,600 on top of that. So now if we're going to add in a $2 deposit for every drink served, we're now ahead by $7,000 and we're making about $1,500 profit for the club overall. So it's a pretty good improvement. Now, just for fun, let's see what it looks like at a 50,000 person stadium. But say we have 12,000 patrons on average. So we're going to average that up, 12,000. And we're serving 0.8 drinks per person. And we're going to have 150 events per year, so 3 a week. We're going to assume that despite being a 50,000 capacity venue, this one doesn't experience peaks and just stays at around 12,000 attendance. But this calculator can have extra sections added for peaks and troughs throughout the year. This venue is going to pay a lot less for single-use cups, so I'm going to assume they pay half the price, 12 cents. And I'm going to change this to IML printing, which is better for scale and costs less at units above 6,000. So if we do a quick check of the results page at this point, we can see the venue's using 1.4 million cups per year, and they are generating 11 tons of waste in single-use cups alone. So it's costing them $172,000 in single-use cups. So I'm going to go back to the inputs, and I'm also going to assume the stadium is not going to be charging a deposit. So I'm going to remove that. And we can see at a loss rate of 6%, the stadium is going to need 88,000 cups to get them through the year. So on the results page again, they're going to save $103,000 compared to single use, which is a crazy amount. But a place that is this big is pretty unlikely to have a loss rate of 6% starting out. So I'm going to go back and change that to 10%. So you can now see that they're saving around $62,000. And now you can see the impact of these return rates, because if I change it to 15% loss, suddenly they're only making $7,000. And they're probably going to need a higher budget amount than that to cover the cost to wash all the cups. But they will be saving on waste disposal for that 11 tons of single use that they're no longer putting in the bin. So we'll go back to the inputs. Now, say they've got a really terrible loss rate of 20%. But they want to introduce a cost per cup to cover the loss rate. So to do this in the calculator, I can just add an amount to the deposit collected from the customer and leave the return amount blank. So that's just the same as adding an extra cost to the price per drink. So I'm going to put in 5 cents. Now, this venue is going to be saving $42,000 compared to single use, and that's just adding 5 cents to the cost of their drink. Before that, if they didn't add the 5 cents, they were behind $47,000. So the calculator kind of also demonstrates how important drink pricing is for large venues. So as we've seen, there's different ways to reduce your cost depending on the size and event frequency that you have at your venue. We're going to send you your own copy of this after the webinar so that you can enter your own numbers and explore what the costs look like for you. Let me know if you have any questions or need extra inputs as you go along, because I've made a few different versions of this calculator for different types of events and venues. So I'll likely be able to add in anything extra that you need. I'm going to hand back to Christie now to walk through what getting started with reusables might look like in practice.
Cool, thank you. So go back to here. Alrighty, so thanks, Sam. So let's chat now about how to actually get started with reuse and how to avoid some of those common traps that can stall your momentum. So the first and often hardest is getting that buy-in. So most people aren't really resistant to the idea of reuse itself. They just want that confidence that it's going to work and that it's not going to create more issues than it solves. So that's why we suggest bringing your key stakeholders in early. This includes the likes of your bar and food operators, your operations crew, your waste and cleaning staff. They do know the areas best and will often have really smart, practical suggestions that will make your system successful for your circumstances. And when you're raising the idea of reuse internally, try to focus on those outcomes that it helps deliver. There's some of those things that Sam highlighted in the calculator. It does support things like your sustainability and waste reduction goals. It's becoming an expectation from fans as part of having a better experience, and it is increasingly aligned with shifting policy away from single use. You can also lean on those real world examples and case studies to help showcase what's possible. And yet use the calculator. We'll send you after the session to outline what it could look like specifically with your own event numbers and setup. Once you've got the support you need and everyone is on board, just start simple. One of the most common mistakes that we see is testing reuse in just one small outlet, like a single bar, while everything else on site still uses single use. It might feel like a lower risk way to go about it, but it does end up confusing patrons, weakening your messaging, and usually leads to poor return rates, which is not what we want to see. So if you are going to trial reuse, the most effective approach is to pick a self-contained area, like a bar-only zone, and make reuse the default there. That way, every patron gets the same communication and same system within that space. And to be clear, there's nothing stopping you from going all in on site from the start if your setup allows and your stakeholders are on board. You will really learn a lot this way. But I will say, before you go down that path of doing a trial or pilot, just be really clear on what you want to learn from that. So think about those things, like what do you want to learn from doing the trial in the first place, and what data or proof is needed to implement reuse ongoing. Because we have seen too many trials get stuck in pilot mode because they weren't set up with clear goals and knowing what decisions they needed to make to keep moving forward as well. And keep in mind that the best systems do evolve over time. Just because you start off doing it one way doesn't mean it has to stay that way. We have had customers start off with deposits when they first started, and now because it's so ingrained in their operations, they get really high return rates without it. You're always going to learn far more by doing something than trying to plan and get everything perfect at the start. So if you need any advice or support about anything to do with reuse at all, just ask us. We're always happy here to help. So we'll do a quick recap of the things that you'll get before we can open up to some questions. So what you'll walk away from today with is a copy of our reuse calculator. So that's where you can model your own data and get your head around the numbers for a business case if you need it. Second, we have a getting started guide. So that's a short practical summary of what to think about when planning your reuse system. So some great tips and things in there. And finally, you'll have us. So you're welcome to reach out if and when you're ready to explore what reuse could look like, and have some practical support from us when you need it as well ongoing. So I'll open it up for questions now. So feel free to come off mute and ask, or pop them in the chat. Adam, I'll leave you to sort of facilitate it if they come through.
Oh, that was excellent. Thank you, Sam and Christie. And just for context, I first saw all this in action at the Australian Open, and the conversation starters when we go back to that point about being a pilot area to what it could be over that whole precinct is absolutely mind-blowing. And everything from the calculator of how you can save costs and that being a justification. You always know that's that intersection of challenge when it comes to environment and climate action. But when you can demonstrate a cost savings and then potentially add in the other elements like commercial side and branding as it comes to reusable cups, that was a real eye-opener. And I just reflected on just an observation of a Grey Goose branded day at the Australian Open. And those were the ones that were getting lost in the exciting government-partnered Sustainability Victoria ones were the ones that were going more into circulation. So there can be an actual brand benefit as well to actually getting it in. But yeah, that was super fascinating. And I've got some questions, but I want to open to the floor first because a few came through during the registration process and that. So if anyone here has a question, please feel free to jump in. And yeah, make it relevant to your operations or insights or broad questions. So go crazy.
It's always hard to be the first.
All right, I'll do the first question if no one's
I can give one.
Oh, Brian,
Sorry to interrupt.
Go for it.
The calculator is really useful. It's really interesting to look at how the percentage drop off happens, like the 5% that don't get returned, and really good how you can calculate that going through the year and over time. I'm just wondering is there an equivalent type of calculator that can be used to look at the cost of washing the cups and the different
Yeah.
solutions on site for that? Because that's obviously the cost that we haven't spoken about,
Yeah.
and trying to figure out how that works into everything.
Absolutely. So the reason why it's not in the calculator to begin with is because it kind of depends on whether you like, for some events we wash off-site here in Keysborough, and for other events they'll wash on-site but have like a really specific setup that they use. So I have got a calculator that's for on-site washing that includes like equipment and labor. Is that the kind of calculator that you think would be what you need? Are you asking about
Yeah,
washing on-site?
I
Yeah.
think it would be just alongside that, just to get that idea of
Yeah.
comparing it with washing on site versus washing off site, and the different
Yeah.
ways that you can approach it, and just seeing where that factors in. Because obviously it's really interesting too, seeing about the charging like a 5 cent charge for the cups, and then it ends up being 100K profit basically.
When I made the
Which
calculator, I
is
was like,
great, but it's to compare that to, oh, do we have to spend 50K on the washing throughout the year because we have to have a staff member there? But
yeah,
yeah, getting that whole picture would be really good, and seeing how best to look at approaching that, I guess.
yeah, absolutely. That's one that needs quite heavy customization
Mhm.
for specific events, I think, as well. But I can send you what I've got, and you can put input data in and see what comes out.
Yeah, cool.
And just off the back of that, and probably like it's a life cycle question, Christy and Sam. It's like how long do cups stay in circulation for typically? Does it all depend on the event and the brand, or who decides to take them home? And yeah, like I think that's one that was popping in the kind of the pre-discussion a lot when we talk about reuse. Is yeah, kind of that life cycle. Do you have some insights on what you're seeing as an industry? Being this is quite yeah at the curve.
Yeah, there's two ways cups disappear, and that is either people taking them home or putting them in the bin. So
The wrong bin.
the wrong bin, obviously, not the return bin. And there's some really cool cleaners out there like Closed Loop who sort all the waste, which is amazing because that means they're making sure the cups are getting back where they need to be. But yes, for branded cups, they will definitely leave the system faster because people want to take them home. There is a sort of like threshold of like, I've got 10 cups at home, do I really need to take any more?
Yeah.
But those unbranded cups with really strong messaging on them tend to have the longest life within the system.
Yeah.
The other thing that probably affects them is how outdoor crazy is the event, because that's where you'll find more breakage. Like if you have an indoor event that's really calm and civilized and sit down and stuff, the cups are going to last as long as your systemic takeaway containers have lasted in your house, which is probably upwards of 10 years.
Yeah.
No, that's perfect because I think a lot of people tuning into this post event will be from state sporting organisations and the like, and running kind of those one-off events, be it a school's championship or working with operators to look at innovation. I think it just will really get them thinking that there's a real storytelling benefit to this, but also the financial benefit in their event planning and execution. So, yeah, and then added in the potential benefits of souvenirs for those who want a little keepsake from their time away. So that's
Yeah, it's definitely a way that some clubs use to fund the system as well. It's by getting those sponsors on board, and the sponsors are usually really keen to engage with those visible sustainability kind of
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, Dark Mofo down in Tassie as well actually used their deposit system to fund a whole washing setup. Two whole
20-foot
washing setups.
containers, yeah.
Yeah, so there is different levers that you can pull to make things work for you, and like we have seen so many different ways of doing it. So yeah, if you do want to chat about any of that and what options you might be able to consider for your like you specifically, yeah, we can always chat about that and jump in a quick call.
And your analogy of wheelie bins, I think, really resonates because that's like literally the typical way that waste is disposed across community and regional sports and across our suburbs. So it really gives that kind of impact that so much goes in after one event. You can physically understand what you're saving. So I like the storytelling element of wheelie bins because we all get that. So
Yeah.
anyone else got any final questions or thoughts that come to mind? Whilst we have the team here, feel free to jump in. If not, I've just got one final question.
Andrew kind of keeps looking, he wants to. Oh, no, Ian, sorry.
In terms of sort of staffing requirements, Are you relying mostly on whoever the pre-existing sort of cleaning contractor is to take care of that and do that washing themselves? And then what would be best practice or sort of minimum you require for, is it like one person per X amount of cups, something like that, to keep on top of washing it and handling that? Or is that something that you would externally sort of seek to supply as well?
It's really quite specific to the venue, I would say. It's about what's within your cleaning contract and that, like, how are your cleaning staff, how you work with them. Like, if they're like, oh, it's kind of, we find it's really important to get all the different stakeholders on board with the system and like be able to contribute their own ideas and thoughts about the challenges so that they have ownership of whatever their part is in it.
Yeah.
And we do have hybrid situations where they can wash some and send the rest back to us to manage, which works really well for venues that don't have a great deal of storage. So they might need 20,000 cups, but they can only store half of that at the time of a weekend. So it's like you can rotate through the stock. So it's really custom depending on the event. And then with some venues, we work at like music venues, for example, they need to have minimum shifts for bar staff anyway. So they can put the bar staff on cup washing prior to their shift and then work through the peak and then finish after that.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Oh, Andrew.
I was just thinking, is there also an infrastructure consideration around the washing of the cups too? So the larger venues maybe say, well, we want to do it all ourselves, but we need to actually upgrade our washing capacity, not just people, but actually the space and the sinks and whatever to actually physically wash up the cups. Is that a consideration too?
It can be. So a good example of that is we helped with the whole inception of Feel Good Wellington, which is a whole region-wide reuse system. And they really wanted to have a centralised infrastructure for the washing and logistics housed at Sky Stadium so that Sky Stadium could benefit from that being in their venue, but also service a number of different sporting venues like TSB Arena and other community-focused events from that. So what we did is actually design something within their space that they had, and it's quite a small space actually, but finding like the right washing equipment, how it was all going to be set up, the kind of staffing requirements that could all be budgeted for. And then they co-contributed to that, as did some of the government funding and things like that, really to make all that happen. But yeah, once again, it's like looking at what's available and coming up with something that's going to be fit for that, that specific context. So that was really exciting to see at that scale. It was like there's so many cool events and venues wanting to get on board with reuse. So like collaborating together to make it all happen was just such a win. And I think that there's an opportunity for a lot of that all across Australia as well.
And you might be surprised by what you can do in your limited space. Like we've got cups at the Queen Vic Night Market, and they just use a tiny glass washer to wash 4,000 cups every Thursday. And it's just like when I saw it, I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's just the tiniest space. It's awesome.
Yeah.
And it's a good point you raised there in terms of government grants and particularly those kind of within our local government networks. There's so much in terms of testing the appetite to this because we could do it at scale, but sometimes this starts as a small action. And I think Sustainability Victoria and that pilot you've done in Victoria is a really good case study for those who tune in to have a look in terms of the Australian Open and some of those figures that are dig a bit deeper that are on your website and socials. So yeah, the government support is really key to this movement as well, just as much as it is on us as sports industry operators and partners as we go down the reuse and recycle element of waste management and trying to minimize landfills. So I'll leave it there with any last final thoughts or questions. I'll just have a look. Can't see any there, but from my perspective and the C team and our members, we're incredibly grateful for the Bettercup team joining us today. I love calculators and this physical storage element. So I think that really hits the mark that it's not just saying numbers, but you can actually model it based on your specific business requirements and the constraints. And to what Brian was saying with the washing and Ian with the like, they're really key elements that could be factored into your modeling. And it's just critical to the overall storytelling because it's easy to forget there's a cost to going to landfill and the cost of going into waste. And that's an important element in that opportunity cost element of what we talk about, that we can't forget that there is still added costs of once it leaves your site, be it to yourself or the community, or abroad. So yeah, from my perspective, very grateful for everyone's attendance. We'll have this recorded, as you all know, and we'll be sharing some great resources from the team. So I'll stop the recording now, and thank you everyone for joining.